What if everything you learned in history class was a lie? Not just one small detail, but the entire story. What if it was all a carefully built narrative, designed to hide a single world-changing truth? What if the great empires we all know, the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, weren't scattered, competing civilizations at all, but were all part of one single, global superpower? An empire with technology that might just rival our own. An empire that was deliberately, methodically, and completely erased from history. They were called the Tartarian Empire, and the evidence of their existence has been hiding in plain sight all along. Today, we're peeling back the layers of that deception to ask the forbidden question: who were the people of Tartaria, and what on earth happened to them? This is a journey into a past you were never supposed to see. So, stick with us as we uncover what might be the single greatest lie ever told in your history class. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a deep dive like this. If you find this story as mind-blowing as we do, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Because the truth deserves to be told. The ghost on the map. The official story of our world is one of slow, gradual discovery. We picture brave explorers on treacherous seas, slowly filling in the blank spots on the map. We're taught about the rise and fall of unique empires, each with its own culture, technology, and territory. But what if the maps themselves tell a completely different story? For centuries, from the 1300s all the way to the late 1800s, the world's best cartographers drew maps of the known world. And on these maps, one name keeps showing up, covering a bigger area than almost any other: Tartaria, or Grand Tartary. This wasn't some tiny kingdom or a disputed territory. It was a colossal dominion that stretched from the Caspian Sea across Siberia, Central Asia, and on some maps, even reached into the Americas. Mainstream history tells us this was just a catch-all term, a convenient label used by Europeans for vast, poorly understood regions. They say the locals were broadly called Tatars, and the name got mixed up with the Greek concept of Tartarus, or hell, showing just how much Europeans feared these distant lands. The name's disappearance from maps in the 19th century, they argue, wasn't a conspiracy, but simply a reflection of better geographic knowledge. But could it be more than that? Believers in the Tartarian theory say you don't dedicate that much space on a map for that many centuries to just a vague idea. They point to maps showing detailed cities, borders, and regions like Muscovite Tartary, Chinese Tartary, and Independent Tartary. This, they claim, isn't a placeholder. It's a depiction of a known, organized, and powerful empire. The real question is, if Tartaria was so huge and well documented by the world's top map makers for 500 years, why have most of us never even heard of it? Why was it not just defeated, but completely scrubbed from the record? The maps are the first clue, the first tier in the official story. If history is written by the victors, what kind of victory is so absolute that it can wipe an entire empire off the face of the earth and out of our collective memory? The maps show us a ghost, and it's our job to find out if it was once a living, breathing giant, an impossible global architecture. Now let's go from the maps on the table to the world right outside your window. Take a look at the grand old buildings in major cities across the globe, from Paris, France to Paris, Texas. From American state capitals to administrative centers in India, you'll start to see something weird. An undeniable architectural echo. We see magnificent domes, soaring pillars, and intricate facades, all in a style so grand and so similar, it seems almost impossible. Historians give these styles different names: Neoclassical, Beaux-Arts, Second Empire, and tell us they simply spread through trends and colonialism from the 18th to the 20th centuries. It's a neat explanation, maybe a little too neat. The Tartarian theory offers a wilder alternative. What if they weren't copies? What if they were all originals, built by the same global civilization? Proponents of this idea argue that these structures are the surviving relics of the Tartarian Empire. They point to buildings like the United States Capitol, the great cathedrals of Europe, and even the Taj Mahal, and claim them as Tartarian. The evidence, they say, is in the details. Think about the sheer scale and opulence. These Gilded Age buildings seem to pop up out of nowhere, built with a level of craftsmanship we'd struggle to replicate today, even with all our modern machinery. We're told they were built in record time by men with horse-drawn carts and basic tools. Does that really seem plausible? Then there are the photographs. Researchers point to thousands of images from the late 19th and early 20th centuries that show these magnificent buildings standing proudly in what look like eerily empty cities. The streets are often just mud tracks, and the few people you see seem out of place, like they've inherited a world they didn't build themselves. The contrast is jarring, a horse and buggy world set against architecture that feels centuries ahead of its time. Could it be that these architectural styles aren't just a shared aesthetic, but a shared heritage? A global blueprint left behind by a single unified culture? It's a staggering thought, that the landmarks we celebrate as our unique national treasures might actually be the standardized, mass-produced infrastructure of a lost global empire. An empire whose silent stone monuments have been hiding the truth in plain sight, the mud flood burying the truth. This is where the story gets really dramatic. If a global empire with these incredible cities actually existed, where did it all go? How do you hide something that big? The answer, according to the theory, is as simple as it is terrifying. You just bury it. This brings us to a central pillar of the Tartarian mystery, the Great Mud Flood. Proponents claim this wasn't a flood of water, but a cataclysmic event of mud and earth that swept across the entire globe sometime in the 18th or 19th century. This event, or maybe a series of them, is said to have buried the ground floors of Tartarian cities, wiped out much of the population, and literally reset the world's landscape. The evidence for this is once again hiding in plain sight. Walk through the historic district of almost any old city. Look at the stone buildings. You'll eventually find them. Windows peeking out just above the sidewalk. Doors that lead nowhere, halfway up a wall. Grand entrances that now open into a basement. The conventional explanation is simple enough. Cities evolve. Street levels get raised over time for new infrastructure like sewers and trams. Buildings settle. What looks like a buried first floor is just an old ground level from a past era. But mud flood researchers ask you to look closer. Is that explanation really enough? They point out that this is a global phenomenon. It's not just in one or two cities known for redevelopment. It's in St. Petersburg, Boston, Istanbul, and countless others on every continent. Did every city on Earth just decide to raise its streets by 10 or 20 feet all at once? They also argue the architecture itself doesn't fit the settling theory. You see beautifully crafted stone facades meant to be seen, buried deep in the dirt. Why would anyone build gorgeous windows and ornate doorways just to have them at ground level, or even completely underground? The mud flood theory says they weren't. These were once the grand ground floors of a civilization that lived on a much lower plane. Old photographs from the 19th century seem to support this, showing massive digging projects in cities all over the world. The official story calls this construction. But what if it was really excavation? What if our modern cities weren't built from the ground up, but dug out from the mud down? This theory suggests that the world we live in is post-apocalyptic. A world where the survivors of a cataclysm woke up, found these half-buried, abandoned cities, and just moved in. It would explain the empty streets in early photos and the strange disconnect between the people and the architecture. It suggests we aren't the builders of the modern age, but merely its scavengers. Star forts and forgotten technology. The mystery deepens when you look at one of the most beautiful and baffling structures found across the globe, the Star Fort. These are military fortifications with a distinct star-shaped design made of triangular bastions, and you can find them scattered across Europe, the Americas, and Asia. History tells us these forts, also called Tres Italiennes, were an Italian invention from the 15th century designed to withstand cannon fire. The angled bastions eliminated defensive dead zones, allowing defenders to cover every inch of the wall. Their low, thick walls of earth and brick were perfect for absorbing cannonball impacts. By the 19th century, as explosive shells were invented, the Star Fort became obsolete. It's a solid military explanation. But for believers in the Tartarian theory, that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. They ask, were these structures really just for defense, or were they something more? The sheer number, size, and geometric perfection of these forts are stunning. Some theorists believe they weren't just forts, but but complex energy hubs. They argue that the star shape, the materials used, and their placement near water suggest they were part of a global grid, harnessing the natural electromagnetic energy of the Earth. Those intricate designs, they claim, weren't for deflecting cannonballs, but for channeling energy. This connects to a wider belief that the Tartarian civilization had mastered advanced technologies, including free, wireless energy. Proponents suggest that the spires and domes on older buildings weren't just for decoration, but were antennas and receivers in a global wireless network, a concept Nikola Tesla would later try to bring back. Could it be that the so-called World's Fairs of the late 19th and early 20th centuries weren't about showing off new inventions, but were actually liquidation sales for the salvaged tech of this fallen empire? Theorists point to the huge temporary palaces built for these fairs, like for the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. These massive, ornate structures were lit with thousands of electric lights when electricity was still a novelty. They were presented as temporary buildings made of plaster and wood, and then promptly torn down after the fair. But what if they weren't temporary? What if they were surviving Tartarian buildings, shown off one last time before being dismantled, their technology hidden away to usher in an age of fossil fuels and metered energy? This theory suggests a great reset of technology, where clean, free energy was replaced by a system based on profit. The star forts and grand exposition halls, in this light, are silent witnesses to a lost age of technological wonder, the Great Reset and the erased people. If you erase an empire's technology, architecture, and maps, one thing remains: its people. What happened to the Tartarians, and who orchestrated such a massive global cover-up? This theory connects the mud flood, advanced technology, and rewritten history into a chilling narrative called the Great Reset. Supporters claim that 19th century industrial empires conspired to erase the memory of Tartaria, a highly advanced global civilization, to gain control. You can't introduce a new system, economy, or version of history if the memory of a superior civilization still exists. The mud flood, whether natural or man-made, supposedly wiped out huge populations and left behind half-buried cities. These cities were then repopulated and their histories rewritten. One example is the orphan trains from 1854 to 1929, which relocated over 200,000 children from East Coast cities to the Midwest. While officially a welfare effort, theorists suggest these orphans were survivors of the mud flood, stripped of their heritage to create a new population with no memory of the past. Finally, wars like World War I and II allegedly destroyed remaining Tartarian architecture. Historic buildings weren't just collateral damage, they were targeted. Institutions such as the Smithsonian are accused of hiding or destroying artifacts, including supposed skeletons of Tartarian giants, to preserve the official narrative. This theory paints a picture of a coordinated, centuries-long effort to sever humanity from its true past, a reset meant to make us forget a time of incredible technological advancement and lock us into a controlled, conflict-driven timeline. Tartaria's story is not just about a lost empire, it's about a stolen future, the sobering view of mainstream history. After exploring the Tartarian theory, it's important to consider the mainstream perspective held by historians, archaeologists, and scientists. They view the Tartarian Empire idea as a modern myth based on misinterpreted evidence and unrelated connections. First, Tartary was never a single empire, but a vague European term for vast, poorly mapped Asian regions inhabited by various Tartar peoples. As maps improved, the term was replaced by specific names like Siberia or Central Asia, not erased. Second, similar architectural styles worldwide, like Beaux-Arts and Neoclassicism, spread from Europe through colonialism and cultural exchange. Grand buildings in America reflected a desire to emulate classical European power and sophistication. Third, no geological or archaeological evidence supports a global mud flood. Buried city features result from urban development, where streets were raised over time for infrastructure, making old basements or ground levels appear buried. Fourth, star forts have well-documented military histories tied to gunpowder artillery defenses. There's no proof they were energy hubs. Finally, World's Fairs buildings were temporary structures, well documented in construction and demolition, and orphan trains were social welfare responses to poverty and overcrowding, with no connection to hidden civilizations. In summary, mainstream scholars see the Tartarian theory as conspiracy thinking, starting with a desired conclusion and selectively using anomalies while ignoring abundant evidence and rational explanations. We're faced with two views. One, a thrilling story of a lost global empire and cover-up. The other, a careful, evidence-based explanation from mainstream history. Is Tartaria a forgotten civilization or a modern myth? The facts are here. What you believe is up to you.